The female lead empowers women to take the lead in their own lives, at every age and every stage. An educational foundation that listens to women, collects insight through research, and amplifies women's voices by telling their stories, always aiming to stimulate positive change through films and books. 2 volumes of incredible women's stories, donated to tens of thousands of schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. Live events.
I recognize I didn't get here by myself, and so I stand in that power.
Partnerships with powerful voices.
Don't take no for an answer. If someone's like, this probably won't happen for you, just wait and watch me do it.
All brought to life through our millions of followers on social. And through our female lead societies in schools and universities. We help girls discover new role models and career aspirations. Understanding women and girls is at the heart of our work.
At the Female Lead, we know you can't be what you can't see.
And through our research into mental health and social media, we found a solution to its negative impact on girls. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people all over the globe. But we're not just about future generations. The Female Lead is improving the lives of all women through our groundbreaking Fulfillment Finder tool. Built on neuroscience, Fulfillment Finder helps women to build self-awareness.
I need to work on a sense of excitement and, enjoyment.
We're on a mission to understand what fulfillment means to different women, and in so doing, help to build a better workplace. We passionately believe in helping each other to reach that goal, because we rise by lifting others. There's a lot to do, and we're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our very special LinkedIn Live in this week, which is International Women's Week. I'm very excited to be here to share with you my new book, When She's in the Room, and to do it, to get this into the best context we possibly can. I'm completely thrilled to have someone I met recently and whose book I loved and admired, and that is the wonderful Philippa Gregory. Welcome, Philippa.
Hello, thank you so much. Good to be with you.
If I can just say a few words, let me just remind you, Philippa Gregory wrote this quite incredible book that blew my socks off. And although we're here to talk about my book, I want you to know what a fan I am of this multi-million best-selling historian and novelist. And I believe Normal Women is really the culmination of her life's work and collection, which is all around women through 900 years of history. So I know we're going to have a fabulous conversation. And I know all of you out there love to save up your questions. So do please send them in and we will get to questions. And so with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Philippa, because I know you've got some questions and discussions that we want to have.
Well, I wanted to start with a question which I think we have in common. And it was problematic for me that when I was writing Normal Women, 900 Years of Making History, it was perfectly natural for me to talk of medieval women as them and they, because the time difference between a medieval mind and a contemporary mind is so enormous that you can't really say us and we of a medieval woman. As a modern woman, you're a different sort of being altogether. You have a different consciousness, I'm sure. But when it came more up to the present day, I suddenly realized that it felt strange and awkward to talk about women, say, of my generation, talk about women in the 1960s and say they felt, they wanted, they were doing this, because some of the instances I was doing, I was there, and it felt like it would have been much more normal and natural to say us and to write a book about women's history, and it would be the history of us, using that word. And I spoke to a friend of mine, a very fine historian, about it, and I said, I really want to write this history and say this is the history of women and we have gone through this. And she said to me, they will slaughter you. And what she meant was the academic critical reviewers would take very, very badly to the idea of a historian inserting themselves in what is actually, after all, our own history. So partly with that in mind, and partly because of, really, I do think that medieval women are a very different consciousness from modern women, I used they, and was really struck by, in the end, I write a book in which I am saying this is our history, this is us, but throughout it, for consistency, I mostly talk about women and say they did this and they did that. And I noticed that, of course, I now look for that. I noticed that you did the same thing in the female lead, and I wondered whether it seems to you also as a sort of a distancing mechanism, which is how histories and books are written about women, as if women are a different thing, a separate thing, a they thing.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this until you raised the question. And I find myself always saying we. And now you've made me so conscious of it. I tried to think about why I say that. And I think the way I can, I suppose, justify it to myself is that I've always, my background is a data scientist, and I've always studied millions of people. My early career was studying millions of consumers. And so looking at them through that lens, even though I myself, as you rightly say, am a consumer, I'm now doing the same with women and looking at data about women and saying they in the same way. So I wonder if it is some element of confidence and authority, and that it is something that, we really need to think about and maybe alter, so that we do start to create a greater authority in our words. And I will, I will think about that, and I may well adjust it. I've worked with Professor Ian Robinson, who's written a brilliant book on confidence. And he basically says he has facts and proof that men have a greater sense of self-worth, and so automatically get voted as more capable than women, by women as well. So little bit of a shocker there. And some of the research we've done has actually shown us that when women, particularly when they have children, reset to a more unentitled mindset. And so perhaps take shelter, take comfort more from distancing and looking at things from a sort of slightly longer, more remote lens. So all of those things interest me. I don't know the answer, but now I know it, I will think very hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the issues for women is that in every generation, and with remarkably little science behind it, people have speculated, and worse than speculate, I mean said outright, what is the nature of women? So from the earliest Greeks right the way through to Darwin, right the way through to anthropologists and archaeologists and neurologists today, people say things about women's brain or women's nature or women's physique or capabilities, which are simply not true. One of the
Right.
things, one of the things that was so funny about writing Normal Women was looking at these assertions which are maybe 100 years old, and they're now laughable. You would never ever, you would quote them only to make people laugh. There's a lovely one, one of my favorites, where an American doctor warns women against too much bicycling because he says you will get bicycle face, which is how the features of your face come together all in one place. So basically you just nose like maybe a wolf or something. And he publishes this and nobody says, "You're nuts, mate." Nobody says that. Everybody goes like, "Oh yes, bicycle face. You've got to watch out for that." And so one of the things that's so striking to me is that this idea that men theorize about the nature of women and then women believe it.
Mm, mm.
And I wondered if isn't that one of the things that you're in a sense up against a lot of the time?
Yes, and I think that the reality is that they are such generalizations and such wide sweeping generalizations at that. And the ones that are most common are to do with how women are at certain ages. We are all thinking about we're all thinking about babies at certain ages, and then now everybody's enlightened, we're all worried about menopause at certain ages. And of course, the nuances are far, far greater than that. And so, one of the things I've been trying to do with my fantastic female lead community is understand the differences in women's lives at different ages and life stages. So trying to now create data to understand that you can be, let's say, 40 years old and you can be single or married, you can have children or not, you can be divorced or even widowed. And so all of those life changes mean that someone of 40 can be remarkably different from the next 40-year-old. And I think until we show the power of understanding those differences and that there can be wonderful insight and data from understanding how people's needs and wants change, only then can we get away from these really bland and very discriminatory broad brush sweeps.
Very limiting as well. I mean, you having approached this from the point of view of big data as opposed to a Victorian doctor from his opinion, having looked at his wife once and gone like, that's what I think of her. I mean, do you think there is at all a nature of women which is distinct from, say, the nature of men, that you could actually attach some qualities to?
Would you know what I've found that absolutely intrigues me is that there are more similarities between women and men once you understand their key motivators than there are between all the same types of women. So let me try and explain that better. So one of the things I'm really interested in understanding is what makes people excited and interested and involved in different aspects of life and work. So why do we get out of bed in the morning? What excites us? What are the words we want to hear? What's the work we want to do? And I call that fulfillment. And what I found through using neuroscience is, and the survey that we call Fulfillment Finder, what I've learned is that we all have two key drivers. And those two key drivers can change a little over time. One of them tends to change, not both of them. So we kind of live with them as our kind of, it's part of our DNA almost through life. But when under pressure or stress, one of them goes a bit haywire. And I've seen that in myself. So there are fundamentally 12 combinations of these double motivators. And interestingly, women and men can both be characterized in this way. So you could find someone who's male who has almost the same drivers and motivations and respond to the same kind of language, the same kind of interest. And so I think cognitive diversity is the way I want to go in sort of trying and understanding what women want and what they kind of need in their work and their life. So, everybody can actually study this. I did my persona, and my persona is I'm not surprisingly, what am I now? I've forgotten what I am. Not a creator, not an influencer, a reformer. Of course, how could I?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised, but my two key drivers are power and enjoyment. And by power, that's really about freedom and choices. It's not really about wielding a stick or anything horrible like that. But yeah, when everything gets out of sync for me, I move towards control more than enjoyment. And that's when my life becomes a little unhappier.
Yes, interesting. And also so interesting that in a conversation between two women, when one of us mentions power, we have to say immediately, we don't mean power over somebody else or coercive power. We mean literally power over our own lives. And that there are times when I go like, I don't think the average man would stop and clarify that. I think the average man would go like, yeah, sure, power is what everybody wants.
Yeah, you're so right.
But having said that, I'm really conscious, especially having done the work for the history, as to how the range of emotions and characteristics always seems to me like a spectrum from the extremely sort of laddish or testosterone or sort of primitive maleness to what I would describe as excessive femininity, which is where you're really buying into the stereotypes of really the Victorian lady. I mean, it seems to me an outdated model anyway. I mean, I'm not going to get off on Victorian ladies because that will be there for a century. But what I did want to talk to you about is when I was working on particularly Elizabeth I, and people always ask me about Elizabeth I because if you study her in history, and everybody does study Elizabeth I in history, they think, well, there's a woman in power. That's immediately going to benefit women generally. And in the case of Elizabeth I, I am sorry to report that it does not benefit women generally. The legislation against women's freedoms come in and they are worse than anything that's gone before. And they're actually a sort of benchmark for badness. So at that point, it's as bad as it's going to be for women in terms of their loss of freedom to travel, their loss of freedom to choose their work, their coercion inside towns, that they have a whole load of legislation about where they can go, and curfews. They can be inspected by town councils. And all of this comes with a woman on the throne. And that, in a way, I think is troubling to those of us who think that the way ahead is to see women promoted in institutions. And it reminds me of, Margaret Thatcher's truly dreadful record of employing women in senior posts in government, which is, I think she had 2 women in her cabinet ever. And I know that part of the belief of the female lead is that we lift each other up. But how do you explain when women clearly don't do that? And what can be done when women don't do that?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly sad when it does happen, and it happens quite a lot. And I hear a lot of stories about it. And I always believe that we never, ever rise to the top ultimately in our sphere, in our world, if we haven't made important friends and allies along the way. And it's such a missed opportunity not to do that, because I think we are much stronger when we've created that network of, I respect you, you respect me. When I can, I help you, but you help me too. Those are kind of, those are some of the norms we should absolutely be embracing. But the reality is, I know we don't always do it. There's a story that I want to share with you, Philippa, because I loved your stories about how women did all these amazing things through history, including running the feudal lands and the castles of their husbands when they went off to fight in the wars, because the wife was actually the only person that they could trust to do that. I mean, I love this. And they had immense power and control, of course, completely removed if and when they came back. But I loved to hear about that. There's a story I want to share, which I haven't shared very often, but you know, when I was building Dunnhumby, we were growing it to, you know, 1,500 people. It was a global business. Ultimately, we'd, you know, successfully launched Tesco Club Card, and we were taking it around the world. And, you know, someone came up with a brilliant idea of, let's write a book on how we did it, because it was complicated, it was new, it was a new science, it was very pioneering. And so a book was written, and it's called Scoring Points, and it was translated into lots of different languages, and we used it as a kind of calling card as we went round the world. Here you go, these are all the things that we're going to do that we did for Tesco. And that's what people used to ask for. Can I do a Tesco and double my market share like they did? And then I realized, this is what's so ridiculous. I realized years later, as I reread it, I wasn't in it at all. Can you believe it? I was the CEO. Yeah. I'd built it with my husband, granted, from scratch, but I was the leader. I built the teams, I did the deals. I wasn't mentioned. So,
and did you write the book?
I didn't write the book, to be fair. It was,
you commissioned it.
A combination of people whose names I will not mention at this time. But it's partly, I feel my vindication with my book now is that I wrote it, and it's my story. Yeah. And it's also the stories of the women I love and admire. So I kind of feel I've put a little punctuation part on that gap and invisibility in my own history.
That's so extraordinary. And it reminds me of where we started from, which is like talking about us as if we matter, as if we are both subject and object. You know, that you weren't even the subject of the book about your success. Extraordinary.
And it's breathtaking, isn't it? And the stories of women are as breathtaking when you see them. You know, even someone like Oprah Winfrey, who basically said, you know, my success, my wealth is down to the fact that I was underestimated my whole career. And because I was underestimated, nobody ever thought I would amount to anything. And boy, she did. And so have so many others. So I think sometimes, as I say in my book, sometimes getting a little bit angry about what's happened or not happened is quite a powerful motivator to keep moving you up the ladder, or whatever metaphor you use for your career.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to a woman who has a temper. And it doesn't come out very often, and it doesn't come out uncontrolled. So, you know, I don't kick the dog or anything.
No, because but you have feelings and you have knowledge, and those are the things that should never ever be passed by or underestimated. I need, by the way, to give everybody a nudge and say we are coming to questions now, and so I would love you to share those so that I can ask either Philippa or myself as we continue this conversation. Shall we fit in one little short? Have you got one more short question,
I have
Philippa?
one thing I can't bear to let you go without, and it leads exactly on from the
Perfect.
legitimization of one's feelings in the workplace. And I suppose I know that you have a theory about strategies for women, how women can proceed and how women can lift themselves up. And I just wondered if you'd just talk briefly, because we've only got briefly, but if you talk, what do you mean by that? What are the strategies for women in a workplace?
So women have three roles. They are citizens, where they do most of the unpaid work or the low paid caring work. And the reality is women move from um, being themselves at the beginning to then being carers, mainly for children, not exclusively, then for parents or elderly relatives. Even now moving into the role of grandmothers, where they're actually helping their children bring up the children and look after them as they return to work. So sort of complex caring and often unpaid roles. In the workplace, we know the second role, workplace, we know women don't always rise fully through the organization and probably leave prematurely, largely down to their unpaid caring roles that pull them back to the home. The one I want to give real positive encouragement to and reveal anew is something that I think has been forgotten and not spoken about enough, which is women are supreme in one area, and it's really, really important. Women are the decision makers when it comes how to spend the household money. So all around the world, women decide wherever the income comes from, largely how it's spent, even down to the things that people consider are male dominated decisions, which are, cars, mortgages, holidays, all sorts of things like that. So women in the UK alone are worth probably in the order of £500 billion every year. 500 billion. So women are not the supportive role. Women are decision makers. And my idea of making women more visible is to help organizations understand that if they understood the needs and wants of women better, just as we did with consumers and Tesco, there is an opportunity for some companies to react and respond much better, knowing the nuances of women, to actually draw them closer and make them more loyal to that business because they serve their needs and wants. So this is the perfect cycle that I'm hope we're going to reveal. Women, decision makers, the pound that's been invisible is the woman's pound, and that women actually would love to buy from other women. So let's get them into the power roles within companies, because then women will better address what women want. So it's a complicated hypothesis, but it's one that I've delivered in my previous role. So I'm truly excited to do this as part of this new phase.
It's so interesting that you say that. As you were speaking, I was thinking of the medieval women who were both food producers
Yes.
and processors, and they ran the markets, they ran the local markets. So literally women bought from women, and women farmed the food, and women brought it to the marketplace. And what you had then was literally a female economy, almost completely female, sitting comfortably inside the national economy. And what they did with that power was they set prices. So if outsiders came to the local market and tried to buy grain up and take it out of the country to export, even to export it out of the nation to, say, France or somewhere like that, it's the local women that would ban the markets from moving grain. And they would close down the markets because there were so many of them, and because their interests were entirely united, which was to keep local produce local and at the price that they regarded as reasonable, both as producers and consumers. So literally,
Phenomenal.
that situation which you describe as your ideal goal, we've had it in the past. It's not impossible.
And they say there's never a new idea, and that is why I responded so enthusiastically to what you'd captured from our past. I love it. And now, although I could talk to you forever,
Yeah,
Philippa,
let's talk to some
you
women.
need to throw it over and not throw it over, throw it open and see if there are some questions out there. Yes, Clements. That's a beautiful name. I hope I pronounced it right. How do we go above the imposter syndrome and change the world to not feel it anymore? Tricky one, right?
No, I feel a bit like a sort of a cliche guru, because I do think you could maybe embrace the imposter syndrome, and you could say, I know that a lot of leadership gurus say fake it till you make it. So why not just go like, all right, I'm pretending that I do know how to do this. So you've got to have ability to start off with, or experience, or training, or education. You've got to not be an imposter. So that's the main thing, which is, first of all, get your training. And then if you don't think that you're as good as somebody else, just pretend you are until you can see you are. And in that sense, take the imposter syndrome, make it your own.
Absolutely. And we know men will give themselves 8 or 9 out of 10, and we'll give ourselves 5 or 6 out of 10, and we have to stop doing that. And honestly, I have been horribly guilty of that through my career. But I think women are more competent, more able, smarter, hardworking, and actually we have to believe in ourselves, because if we don't believe, no one else is going to. So it's a great question. It's a popular question, but we have to believe in ourselves. Thank you for your question. Which women have inspired you most whilst writing in the room? Oh, okay. I was about to ask you that. So, oh gosh, there are so many to mention. I was absolutely thrilled that Olivia Colman responded to the book, and I know she feels that the disparity in actors amongst males and females is incredibly imbalanced and unfair. And I would agree with her, and I've heard so many conversations around this. There is no rhyme or reason or logic to it, but she describes it very, very well. I mean, all sorts of fabulous women, from Christine Lagarde to Ava DuVernay to Gina. Oh gosh, this is my middle of International Women's Week. The wonderful lady who was absolutely campaigning against upskirting and got horribly trolled and so rudely treated, but she survived and has thrived and changed so much of the world. Tarana Burke, all of these women, absolutely amazing. Even Gina Davis, of course, who we spoke to about her own work. Most of these women have their own charities and their own outreach. So we borrow their wisdom and we borrow their beliefs, because our community is now 8 million women. So we want to share their wisdom with all of the female lead followers out there. So I almost got some names out there. I just struggled with one. Next question, please. Gina Martin. Izzy's just told me.
Very good.
Gina Martin. Sorry. Thank you, Izzy. What are some of the myths that you would most love to debunk about women? Well, I think that's one you can answer, Philippa. What do we want to debunk?
I think for me, one of the most dangerous ones is that there is such a thing as a nature of women, and that that is, it's okay that medieval doctors who knew nothing about modern medicine, or Greek philosophers who knew nothing about modern women, or even Victorian evolutionists are able to pronounce on that. And I think the idea, which was very, very popular in the Victorian period, that women are physically frail, prone to ill health, emotionally highly strung, intolerant of reality, that the business world is too rough for them, that the military life is too violent for them, that the streets are too dark for them, and that they generally should stay home and ideally not do anything money making at home because it will be too stressful for them. I think, although when I describe it like that, it's sort of laughable, I think the ghosts of that horrible, ridiculous body of work just really linger with us. And every time a woman tells me that she can't drive in the dark, or she can drive perfectly well but she can't drive on a road she doesn't know, or when a woman tells me that she's not going to do something because she's not sure that she's able to do it, I just really think this is the Victorian banshee wailing on the rooftops again. And I just wish that we tested ourselves carefully and safely and thoroughly to see what we really can do, and never ever listen to anybody who says that's a thing you can't do.
Oh, that I so agree. The research that we've conducted, with Dr. Terry Apter, is quite amazing. I mean, women are ambitious. They will take risks with careful consideration, lots of thought and planning. They are not finished when they have families. They're just getting going. We're not washed up when we're retired or nearing older age. All of these things are thrown out there, and they are myths. The truths are that women are phenomenal. They are fantastic at STEM careers, right? And then still women are not choosing STEM careers. So there are so many things that we shouldn't believe, and so much belief we should put in our power and each other, and create that network that I mentioned. You can change your life with self-belief. Is there time for one more question, or have we run out, Izzy? We've got one more from Susie. Thank you. What are the challenges facing women in leadership currently? Well, maybe I can address that. I read an article yesterday in the FT, which basically said women are brought in to run companies when it's almost impossible to fix them and everything's going wrong. We only have to look at, some of the challenges in the big tech firms where women are being brought in. Christine Lagarde, who's one of the amazing women that we quote, basically said, when the world is really in danger and really, really unsafe and crying out for help, women are brought in. So I think we have to be very thoughtful about the fact that we don't want to set out to put women in impossible situations, but it may well be this is an opportunity, when so many things are challenging right now, for women to step forward, not be self-effacing, not be modest or Victorian and have the vapors, and basically say, yeah, I'm ready and I can step in and do it. So I think the main challenge is the unpaid caring role. And I think, and I hope, when everybody realizes how incredibly valuable women are to our GDP, we will find some better solutions for caring and other responsibilities to be shared more roundly. But it's a tricky scenario.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I think the other thing that you see, I mean, particularly recently, is when there's a scandal in the company, especially a sex scandal in the boardroom, all of a sudden they decide to put a woman in, as if women have no sexual desires and no possibility of impropriety, which is a bit of a thing to take on anyway. But also the idea that we have completely messed up here. So we'll hand it over to a woman, might as well be the cleaner, because literally what we wanted to do is clean up. And as soon as that job of work's done, then they'll promote a man to the top job again when it's all cleaned up. And I think getting into leadership roles is obviously a challenge. Keeping them is obviously a challenge. And when there, do it like a woman. Don't try and imitate men. Do it how it feels right to you. Maintain your own standards.
Yeah, that's lovely, lovely advice. So, one more, or are we done?
One more.
Oh, if you could describe when she's in the room in 3 words, what would they be? Oh, that's
3
so
words.
clever. I think new perspectives. That's not one word, I know, but really new perspectives. I think real optimism. That's another 2 words, but please can I have them as one? And some new data that's going to help us navigate this. So I am a data geek. I know some of you out there are. We can do this. We can transform our world and our society. It is imbalanced. It is unfair, but we are an amazing force, and 8 million women cannot be ignored, either by business or by government. So let's stick together, understand how we change it, and then reach forward and change it by being the amazing force for GDP and society. But let's focus on our strengths at last and celebrate who we are. So on that incredibly, what I hope, uplifting note, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, the community who've helped to bring us here. Your data, what you've shared, is in the book. So it's about you as much as about the journey I've gone through. So thank you all very, very much. And my heartfelt thanks to the amazing, the wonderful, super, super clever Philippa Gregory. I've loved talking to you, Philippa.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very, very much. I've enjoyed it.